The Septuagenarian Lawyer. By Lainey Lonnie. Our protagonist, Felicity Harmon, 70-something criminal lawyer, short. Loud. No fashion sense. Oversized glasses. Voracious reader. She loves historical legal thrillers and secretly volunteers at a cat shelter. She uses wit, sarcasm, and sheer audacity to win cases. Felicity is designed as a comedic, madcap protagonist who thrives on chaos, wit, and courtroom brilliance. This is a work of fiction. All characters, names, places, and events are imaginary or used fictitiously. Any resemblance to real people or real events is purely coincidental. Courtroom scenes and legal procedures are dramatized for storytelling purposes, and may not reflect actual courtroom practices or legal standards.
Book 1 of the Septuagenarian Lawyer, Felicity Harmon, a feisty, irreverent septuagenarian criminal lawyer, takes on the case of Freddie Palmer, a young man accused of grand larceny. Using her sharp wit, unconventional courtroom tactics, and a healthy dose of chaos, Felicity must navigate incompetent prosecutors, lazy police, sleeping judges, and the antics of a client's troublesome twin brother. Amid the humor, she uncovers a deeper criminal plot and ensures justice, her way. Chapter 1, The Case of the Missing Twin. Felicity Harmon was not a woman to be underestimated. At 72, she still prowled the streets of Youngstown, Ohio, armed with oversized glasses, a cane, and a wit sharper than any gavel in the courthouse. Her criminal defense record boasted more than an 80% win rate, yet police, prosecutors, and judges alike treated her as a quaint oddity, a relic who might accidentally trip over her own cane in the middle of a trial. By the time Felicity reached her office, she had already argued with a bus driver, berated a pigeon for improper judgment, and nearly flattened a hedge trimmer with her cane because it looked at her wrong. None of this was unusual. On a good day, Felicity engaged with the world as if it owed her money. On a bad day, she charged interest. Her office, in downtown Youngstown, Ohio, sat between a payday loan storefront and an abandoned pet grooming shop that still smelled faintly of shampoo and despair. The frosted glass on her door read Felicity Harmon, attorney at law, in chipped gold lettering that had not been updated since Ronald Reagan had a second term. The stairwell up to her floor creaked like a confession under interrogation. Outside the office, life went on, oblivious to the chaos brewing within Felicity's tiny domain. But inside, justice was about to get a lesson in irreverence. Inside, her secretary, Jenny, was already at her post. Jenny, 40-something, on her third cup of coffee and her third ex-husband's alimony check, was reading a celebrity gossip magazine with the concentration of a Supreme Court justice. Her brick-red hair, sculpted into a proud bouffant, defied gravity, gender expectations, and possibly physics. "Morning, Miss Harmon." "You're late," Jenny said without looking up. "Morning, Jenny, and I am never late," Felicity snapped, placing her handbag on the desk with the disdain it deserved. "The clock is early." Jenny finally glanced at her. "The clock's been on the wall since 1996. It's had time to figure itself out." "So should you." Felicity squinted through her glasses. "Is our guest of honor here yet?" Jenny lifted her chin subtly toward the chair in the corner. Freddie Palmer sat there hunched, tapping his knee, bouncing like a metronome for bad decisions. He was in his 20s, thin, pale, and jittery. He wore a wrinkled sweatshirt and jeans that had seen better judgment. He smiled at Felicity like a child hoping to be forgiven for a particularly creative act of vandalism. "You're early," Felicity said. "That's not a good sign. People who are early are hiding something." "I just wanted to show I'm serious about my case," Freddie said. "The grand jury indicted you for grand larceny of a vehicle," she replied. "Your sincerity is already in question." He winced. "As I told you at my arraignment, I didn't take the car." She sighed and dropped into her chair. "I get paid extra for fairy tales, Freddie. Now, tell it to me slow, precise, and preferably with no flotation from the truth." "I didn't do it," he insisted. "I wasn't even there. I was with my ex-girlfriend." "That the one who slammed a beer bottle at your head?" "Technically, it was a flower vase." "She's sentimental." "And where is this sentimental woman now?" She, can't come to court. For legal reasons. Felicity arched one eyebrow so high it nearly disappeared into her frizzy graying curls. She can't come to court for legal reasons while I'm trying to keep you out of legal consequences. The universe is poetic in a very unhelpful way. She's just not comfortable with authorities. She sells counterfeit handbags behind a laundromat, Frederick. Nobody at the courthouse is intimidated by her Chanel with a C backwards. He shrugged. She said if I dragged her into this, she'd testify against me on principle. Against what? Your ability to choose better women? Jenny snorted from behind her magazine. Freddie cleared his throat. But I got something better than an alibi. Oh, no, Felicity muttered. That sentence has never ended well. My twin brother. Jack. Felicity's attention sharpened. You have a twin? Yes, ma'am. Identical. Her fingers slowly tented. You have a living, breathing, genetically mirrored version of yourself and you waited until now to mention this? I was saving it for impact. You're on trial for stealing a car, not hosting a gender reveal party. Jenny leaned in. Is he hot? Jenny, Felicity scolded, though she also briefly wondered. He's identical, Freddie continued eagerly. Nobody can tell us apart, not even our own mama. He's gonna come in, sit there, and the witnesses won't know who did what. Boom. Reasonable doubt. Felicity stared at him for a long moment. Too long. She tapped her pen once. Twice. Then finally said, You watch too much daytime television. It's brilliant, he insisted. You put him at the defense table, they point, and bam, they're pointing at the wrong one. You'll love him. She will not, Jenny muttered. Where is he now? Felicity asked. He moves around. Drifts. Is he a cloud or a criminal, Freddie? A freelancer. Felicity inhaled slowly through her nose, the way monks did when battling inner demons. You have told me many foolish things in the short time I've known you, she said crisply. But relying on your AWOL twin to show up on trial day ranks in my top 3. He will be there, Freddie promised. He said it himself. Did he deliver this message by carrier pigeon or tarot card? He texted me a thumbs up emoji. Keen communicator. Jenny folded the magazine and slid a yellow legal pad toward Felicity. Police report came in. No fingerprints inside the car except the owner's. Security cam caught a blurry figure in a hoodie, but you can't see the face. Felicity smiled faintly. Ah. A blurry criminal. The most misunderstood of species. The witness says it was him, Jenny added, tapping the pad. Lady loading her groceries. Eyewitness identification, Felicity scoffed. The leading cause of wrongful convictions and misunderstandings between husbands and wives. So I'm good? Freddie asked. You're a legal mystery wrapped in a bad idea tied with a shoelace of chaos, Felicity said. Which means you require me. That's good, right? It's expensive. He nodded with great seriousness. I believe in you, Ms. Harmon. That makes one of us. There was a knock at the door. 1. 2. Then it creaked open anyway. A scruffy-looking man peeked in, wearing a municipal parking vest. Is this where I make a payment on a booted vehicle? No, Felicity snapped. But you can leave a soul here. It's been a taxing morning. The man blinked. Sorry, he mumbled and disappeared. She turned back to Freddie. You will bring me your twin. Not a sketch of him. Not a rumor of him. Not a cousin with a mustache. Bring me Jack. He'll be there, Freddie repeated. And your ex-girlfriend? She blocked me. Good woman. So, here's what we'll do. I'll file a request for discovery, poke around for inconsistencies, and see if the prosecution bothers to show up with pants on. Assistant Prosecutor Denard Devlin probably thinks grand larceny is a rock band. I heard he hates trials, Freddie said. Good, she replied. I adore them. Especially when the judge is asleep for half of it. He really sleeps? He once snored through a murder trial and we still got a verdict. Justice in REM cycle. Jenny glanced up. Judge Salver's clerk called earlier. He's back from medical leave. Is he cured of consciousness? Doubtful. There was a pause. A silence so thick, even the dust particles seemed to hold their breath. Then Felicity stood. Freddie, today you get lucky, she declared. I do? Yes. I am officially choosing to believe you are too unorganized to have stolen a car. He smiled. Thanks, I think. And if I discover you're lying, she added sweetly, I will personally haunt every future courtroom you ever enter. His smile stiffened. That's fair. She grabbed her coat and cane. Jenny, cancel my lunch with the Bar Association. You weren't invited. Then cancel my absence. I need to pay a visit to someone who actually appreciates me. The cat shelter again? I said cancel my lunch, not narrate my life. Felicity opened the door. Freddie, do not disappear or get arrested while I'm gone. I'll just sit, he said. Sit and think about better life choices. As the door shut behind her, Felicity marched down the staircase, muttering about twins, thieves, and poorly educated prosecutors. Somewhere in Youngstown, a car thief was walking free. Whether it was Freddie or not remained to be seen. And somewhere out there, was Jack. Or so the legend said. Chapter 2, When the Judge Sleeps, the Cat's Scheme. By the time Felicity reached the bus stop, her patience had been shredded thinner than courthouse toilet paper. She tapped her cane twice against the cracked pavement for emphasis and glared down the street as if the bus driver had personally offended her ancestors. A man beside her, roughly the age of a misplaced garlic clove, cleared his throat. Bus is usually 10 minutes late on Thursdays, he offered kindly. That's because Thursday itself is an insult, Felicity replied. A day that pretends to be Friday but lacks commitment. The man nodded as if this made perfect philosophical sense. When the bus did finally haul itself into view, Felicity boarded with the authority of a woman taking a throne. She glared until a teenager surrendered his seat, then promptly sat as though victory was a constitutional right. 20 minutes later, she stepped off in front of the Youngstown Community Cat Refuge, an oddly cheerful building squeezed between a tire shop and a bail bonds office. The sign featured a smiling cartoon tabby wearing a tiny judge's wig. Felicity softened immediately. Well, hello, your honors, she murmured, stepping inside. The shelter buzzed with soft meows, flicking tails, and the scent of disinfectant desperately trying to mask the smell of judgment. Rows of cages lined the walls, each housing a hopeful inmate awaiting a miracle in the form of a human with low standards. Miss, called Margaret, the shelter supervisor, a plump woman with an overflow of cardigan energy. You're early. I am never early, Felicity said automatically. I am precisely when destiny needs me. You said the same thing last Tuesday, Margaret noted, and yet it remains true. A sleek black cat with luminous green eyes hissed at a nearby volunteer. Ah, Felicity smiled. There's my favorite defendant. Still hostile? Margaret laughed. He tried to attack a shoe this morning. Well, we can't have footwear thinking it's superior. She approached the cage, gazing through the bars. The black cat turned and sat, regal and unimpressed. You and I, Felicity said softly. Misunderstood. Feared by society. Branded difficult when all we want is order. The cat yawned. I presented a stronger case to Judge Bannister in '82 and he ruled against me anyway, she huffed. Clearly you recognize injustice. Margaret slid a clipboard toward her. While you chat with your admirer, could you sign in? Felicity signed with a flourish as if this volunteer log might one day be unveiled as a priceless artifact. She'd just begun pouring fresh kibble into bowls when her phone buzzed. She stared at it suspiciously before answering. Yes? Ms. Harmon, came Jenny's voice, pitched slightly higher than normal. You're going to love this. Or possibly commit arson. My schedule is flexible. A man just came into the office. Claims to be Freddie's twin. Felicity froze. Describe this man. Well, Jenny began, he's large. Not like muscular large. Like corn-fed regret large. His hair looks like someone lost a fight with a weed whacker, and he has a mustache that's doing more work than the rest of his face combined. That does not sound like a genetic mirror of our client. He says his name is Jack. There was a long silence on the line, punctuated only by a distant meow. Tell him to remain exactly where he is, Felicity said. If he touches anything, including oxygen, I will charge him rent. You're coming back? Yes, I need to see what brand of chaos just entered my sacred domain. Jenny lowered her voice. He brought a gift bag. Of course he did. Felicity ended the call and turned to Margaret. Emergency in the legal ecosystem. Somebody has manufactured a twin. Margaret grinned. Go get him, Tiger. Felicity paused. Has anyone ever called you Tiger in a courtroom while you're holding a stapler? No, Margaret admitted. Then don't start a trend. When Felicity returned to the office, she did not immediately enter. Instead, she stood in the hallway like a general approaching a battlefield, listening. Inside, she heard a voice, loud, cheerful, and dangerously stupid. I'm just saying, if they want to know which one of us did it, they gotta prove it wasn't me, that wasn't him, that maybe was someone else. Please stop talking, Jenny begged. You're actually making the walls dumber. Felicity inhaled, straightened her coat, and burst through the door. Every pair of eyes snapped toward her. Freddie sat stiffly in the chair, his jaw clenched. Across from him stood a hulking man who looked nothing like him. This man was taller, broader, his nose crooked from either poor genetics or past enthusiasm. His hair shot out in random directions. The mustache alone could have been charged with disorderly conduct. He grinned. Aunt Fifi. So good to finally meet you. I am not your aunt, emotionally or biologically, Felicity said. And my name is Felicity. You can call me Jack, he beamed. Freddie and I are twins. Then something went wrong in the womb, she replied. Perhaps a clerical error. Freddie groaned. I told you not to just show up like this. Relax, I'm helping. Jack said, then extended the gift bag proudly. I brought pastries. Jenny peeked inside. These are gas station donuts that expired last week. They're vintage. Felicity circled him slowly, cane tapping. You claim to be identical twins? Spiritually, Jack responded. They look like one is a rough draft and the other was erased prematurely, Jenny said. I got stung by a bunch of bees when I was 10, Jack offered. Changed my whole aura. Did the bees also steal your identical DNA? Jack blinked. They were aggressive. Felicity turned sharply to Freddie. You told me identical. I meant, emotionally identical, he muttered. You meant prison identical. Both headed straight there if I don't intervene efficiently. Jack sat. The chair protested. Now, Felicity said, folding her arms. Why are you really here, Mr. Maybe Twin? To help my brother clear his name, Jack replied. Plus, I heard Judge Salver's on this case. That man owes me $75 from a poker game in '09. Of course he does, Jenny whispered, delighted. You know the judge? He snores like a broken leaf blower, Jack confirmed. Nice guy though. Terrible cheater. Felicity stared at him, then smiled. It was not the reassuring type of smile. Jack, she said sweetly, what exactly were you doing outside Franklin's grocery on March 18th at approximately 3:15 p.m.? Jack lifted a brow. Buying snacks? Buying, what kind of snacks? Sunflower seeds, a soda, and some beef jerky I didn't pay for. Freddie jolted upright. You what? Well, the clerk was on her phone and I figured, oh, Jack paused. Was this about that blue Honda parked out front? The room froze. You know about the Honda, Felicity said carefully. Yeah. Dude jumped in and peeled out. Real sloppy though. Almost hit a mailbox. I remember thinking, that guy needs driving lessons. Could you see his face? Not really, but he was skinny. Had nervous energy. All eyes slid to Freddie. Jack leaned closer. He kinda looked like you, before the bees. Felicity stared at the ceiling as if patience might rain down. Wonderful, she muttered. I represent the most incriminated human alive. Jenny perked up. Wait, so there was someone else? Yeah, Jack nodded. Tall guy. Tattoo on his neck. Something like a spider or a weird flower. Felicity's eyes shifted. A spider, you say? Maybe a rose with too many legs. She glanced at Jenny. Get me a list of known car thieves in the county with visible arachnids. Jenny nodded with the enthusiasm of someone who lived for spreadsheets of criminals. Jack stretched. So, like, am I helping or hurting? Yes, Felicity replied. There came a heavy knock on the door, followed by a familiar voice. Open up. Youngstown PD. Freddie turned pale. Jack grinned. Jenny whispered, please tell me you paid your parking tickets. Felicity smoothed her coat, adjusted her oversized glasses, and strode toward the door with delighted fury. Oh good, she said as she swung it open. The amateurs have arrived. An officer stood there, confused already. We got a call about suspicious activity. Felicity gestured theatrically behind her. Gentlemen, this is not suspicious activity. This is defense preparation. One is foolish. One is confused. One is destined for trial. She leaned in, whispering, and one of them is probably telling the truth, which means we are already further along than most of your investigations. The officer squinted. Which one? Felicity smiled. That's the whole point, officer. Chapter 3. A witness with too many opinions. The officer hesitated, clearly unprepared for Felicity's cheerful confidence in ambiguity. Well, he said, clearing his throat. We received a report of suspicious behavior and possibly stolen property. Felicity waved a dismissive hand in the air. You're in Youngstown, officer. If suspicious behavior was a crime, the city would have collapsed into a legal black hole by 1987. She gestured behind her. This is my client, his brother, and my exhausted assistant discussing donuts and poor life decisions. Now if you'd like to charge the pastries, that's between you and God. The officer peered in at Jack, who smiled brightly and gave a little finger guns gesture. He looks familiar, the officer muttered. He's a face you'd forget during a traumatic experience, Felicity snapped. Like a dentist with bad breath. Jack leaned closer. You ever get the feeling you know me from somewhere? Please don't make small talk with law enforcement, Freddie hissed. I got pulled over last year for waving at a stop sign, Jack continued proudly. That checks out, the officer muttered. Is he being detained? Felicity asked. No, ma'am. Then kindly allow these underwhelming citizens to continue disappointing their families in peace. The officer finally backed away. Just, keep it down in here. And tell him to stop looking at me like that. Jack waved as the door closed. Cool guy. He absolutely hated you, Jenny said. Finally, someone honest. Felicity exhaled slowly and returned to her desk. Right. Now that the state has succeeded in nothing, let's return to our scheduled chaos. She turned to Jack. You're going to recount everything you saw outside Franklin's grocery. Slowly. Without creativity. Without metaphors. Without interpreting anything as a sign. Okay, Jack nodded. It was Thursday. I was hungry. I went for sunflower seeds as a spiritual exercise. Go on. There was a blue Honda out front. Locked, I think. I went inside. Came out. saw a tall dude pacing near the car. He had a neck tattoo, like a spider, and a flower had a baby. You saw this man enter the vehicle? Yeah. He looked around real suspicious-like, then just opened the door and slipped inside. Took off fast. Did he drop anything? Look at anything? Argue with anyone? No, but he whistled, like that old song. Jack began off-key, attempting to demonstrate. It was deeply unsettling. Felicity slammed her hand down. No interpretive sound effects. What was he wearing? Jenny questioned. Dark hoodie. Jeans. White shoes. The kind that get dirty if you think about real life too hard. Freddie shook his head desperately. That's not me. I don't wear white. That is true, Jenny said. You respect your filth. Felicity scribbled notes. Now, she said slowly, you didn't see the man's face clearly. But you are willing to testify that it was not your brother. Jack nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. He doesn't have the posture of a criminal. Or the confidence. Freddie perked up. I got confidence. Jack studied him again. You got hope. Different thing. Please stop analyzing each other, Felicity snapped. I can only take so much family dysfunction before billing double. Just then, the phone rang. Jenny answered, then rolled her eyes. Ms. Harmon, it's Mr. Devlin. He's breathing heavily already. Transfer him before I escape through a window. Jenny clicked a button. You're live and desperate. Denard Devlin's voice came through sluggishly. Ms. Harmon. I wanted to discuss your client, Freddie Palmer. I assure you, I do not authorize recreational conversation about my clients. Well, I was thinking, instead of a trial, maybe your client could take a plea? On what grounds? Boredom. He has a prior felony record. That doesn't play well to a jury. Neither do lazy prosecutors, Mr. Devlin, but here we are. He sighed. Look, between you and me, I don't want to go to trial. The judge doesn't like long cases. I don't like standing. You don't like me. Let's just agree to something simple. I have an eyewitness who says it was Freddie. You mean a woman loading groceries while standing in direct sunlight squinting through plastic bags and personal issues? She seemed confident. Confidence is a personality flaw, not evidence. There was a pause. Felicity continued. Everyone's interested in a plea until they realize it involves prison. What are you offering? 18 months. Reduced to 12 for good behavior. Felicity laughed so hard her cane slid off the desk and clattered to the floor. Oh, Denard, she said warmly, you couldn't negotiate a lemonade stand hostage situation. My client is innocent, your evidence is thinner than your legal research, and I'll see you in court. Another long pause. I hear Judge Salver's on this case, Devlin said quietly. Yes. He likes you. He fears me. Same thing, he admitted. Look. Fine. Let's set it for trial. Music to my ears. Devlin hung up without even a goodbye. Jenny whistled. That man hates effort. Good, Felicity said. I am committed to giving it to him. She turned back to Jack. Now, you said the man had a neck tattoo. Do you see many criminals with those? Isn't that most of them? Felicity smiled. Not the clever ones. She reached into a folder and pulled out a stack of mugshots. Let's see if your subconscious has any useful contributions, she said, sliding them toward him. Jack studied them carefully. This one kinda looks like him, he said, pointing at a tall man with hollow eyes and a distinct spider tattoo just above the collar line. I think he's the guy. Jenny gasped. That's Reuben Widowmaker Cass. Charming, Felicity said. He was picked up for auto theft 6 months ago and got out on bond. He's been living behind the flea market, Jenny added. My cousin's hairdresser saw him selling stolen hubcaps like decorative art. Felicity straightened slowly. Oh, I am going to adore ruining his week. She tapped her pen on the desk in thought. If we can establish that another known car thief was in the immediate vicinity, she mused, with a matching description, a distinctive tattoo, and a documented criminal pattern. He's cooked, Jenny finished. Devlin will either actually investigate for once, Felicity continued, or attempt another pathetic plea bargain that I will laugh at publicly. Freddie's eyes brightened. So, I'm clear? You are potentially clear, she said. Which is the best anyone can do on a Wednesday in Youngstown. Jack puffed up. Looks like I turned this whole case around. You walked in with expired donuts and a confession about petty theft, she shot back. Do not get cocky. He grinned. Can I stay and help? You can go and not commit additional crimes. That will help immensely. But what if the real guy shows up here and I recognize him? Felicity dropped her voice. If the real guy shows up here, I will recognize him as well, and I will bury him under 16 volumes of case law and an irritated pigeon. Jack nodded, clearly impressed. You're intense. And you are excused. He limped for the door, then turned. Tell the judge I still want my $75. I'll add interest, she replied. Once the door shut behind him, Freddie exhaled for the first time all day. You believe me? He asked quietly. I believed something was off, Felicity said, studying her notes. Innocence is more complicated than television makes it. But spiders, Freddie, spiders usually lead somewhere dark. So, what's next? I will notify the prosecution of this new suspect and see whether they do their job or take a nap. Meanwhile, you will remain free, upright, and under my direct supervision. Like house arrest? More like disappointment monitoring. Jenny grinned. Ms. Harmon's special program. Felicity stood, grabbed her coat again, and adjusted her glasses. I'm going out for a walk, she said. To where? Jenny asked. To see if a spider spins when you shine a light directly on him. Freddie swallowed. You're going after him, personally? I don't run from criminals, Freddie, she said. They run when they see me coming. She opened the door, cane tapping with fierce precision. And if I find him today, she added, smiling to herself, this case is going to become unbearably inconvenient for everyone involved. Chapter 4, Pretrial Pandemonium. If chaos were billable, Felicity would have retired 10 years earlier. Her office looked like it had been shaken vigorously and then abandoned in a hurry. Legal pads lay open like wounded birds. Case law books were stacked in teetering columns that defied gravity and good judgment. A manila folder labeled Palmer, F. Vehicle theft sat on her desk, buried under a copy of Ohio Criminal Practice, 1974 edition, and a half-empty tin of cat treats. Felicity squinted at the folder. Jenny, she called out, remind me again why I agreed to take this case. From behind the reception desk came the unmistakable snap of chewing gum. Because you said, and I quote, any prosecutor who thinks this case is airtight deserves to be humiliated in public. Felicity smiled. Ah, yes. That does sound like me. She opened the file again, scanning Freddie Palmer's statements for the 20th time. Same story. Same missing details. Same insistence that his identical twin would save the day. Felicity muttered. Like the rapture, always promised, never delivered. Her phone rang. She answered without looking. If this is Denard Devlin asking for a continuance, the answer is no, and I hope your tie catches fire. A pause. Then, Ms. Harmon? This is Denard Devlin. She brightened immediately. Oh good, my prayers are working. I was calling again to see if your client might consider a final plea offer, Denard said, already tired of his own voice. What specifically are you proposing? 6 months. Reduced charge. No trial. Felicity nearly choked. 6 months? He stole nothing, Mr. Devlin. The Honda is back with the owner, and the actual thief was apparently an arachnid-themed menace with stage fright. What if we did, probation? He tried again. For what crime, precisely? For the potential of theft. Mr. Devlin, the American legal system is rooted in proof, not vibes. If you are prosecuting based on intuition, may I recommend astrology? She hung up before he could respond. Jenny leaned in. That bad? That lazy, Felicity corrected. He's hoping I'm tired, confused, or dead. He'll be wrong on all counts. An hour later, Felicity was on the bus heading across town, wedged between a woman with grocery bags and a man loudly explaining cryptocurrency to no one in particular. She exited near a squat brick building with a crooked sign reading Second Chance Cat Rescue. Inside, the air smelled like disinfectant and warm fur. Cats lounged everywhere, windowsills, counters, shelves, watching Felicity with the mild disdain of creatures who believed they ran the world. There she is, called Marta, the shelter manager. My favorite troublemaker. Felicity shrugged off her coat. I only cause trouble where it's needed. She spent the next hour cleaning litter boxes, refilling food bowls, and speaking softly to a one-eyed tabby named Justice, who purred like a lawn mower. You're lucky, Felicity told him. Your cases are straightforward. Sleep, eat, judge silently. As she worked, her mind never stopped. Witness lists. Surveillance footage. The grocery store parking lot. The timing. And Jack, who had since gone AWOL. No matter how many times she called Freddie's number, the answer remained the same: he'll show. He promised. Felicity snorted. Promises from men like that should come with a warning label. By the time she returned to her office, Jenny had arranged the witness files in alphabetical order, which Felicity promptly ruined by spreading them across the floor. We're going to try something unconventional, Felicity said. Jenny blinked. That narrows it down to everything you do. Exactly. If Freddie insists on twins, then twins he shall have, figuratively, if not biologically. Jenny raised an eyebrow. You're going to confuse the jury. No, Felicity corrected. I'm going to make them doubt everyone else. That evening, Felicity reviewed precedent until her eyes crossed. Judge Salver's tendencies were well documented: naps, interruptions, and an alarming habit of asking questions no one wanted answered. She sighed, closing the book. Well, she said to no one, tomorrow we dance. Chapter 5, The Courtroom Begins. Courtroom A of the Mahoning County Common Pleas Court in Youngstown smelled faintly of stale coffee, floor polish, and regret. Today, she marched through it all with her cane tapping a defiant rhythm against the tile. Morning, Ms. Harmon, a young bailiff called. It's not morning, son, it's an insult to time, she replied. And I'm already in a terrible mood, so don't test fate. You look great. That's anemia and vengeance you're seeing. Behind her trailed Freddie, pale and jittery, dressed in a wrinkled button-down that appeared to have been ironed by a frightened raccoon. No sign of Jack yet? She asked without turning around. He texted me, Freddie said. Said he's on his way. He's always on his way. That man is circling the heavens like a confused comet. I told you he'd come through. You also told me your alibi was reliable, and now she's apparently bench-pressing bail bonds somewhere. She just doesn't like courthouses. Neither do I, Freddie, and yet here I am wearing orthopedic stockings in the name of justice. She took her place at the defense table, arranged her papers just so, and peered over her glasses at the prosecution. Denard Devlin looked unprepared, which was his natural state. He was arranging a disorganized pile of papers like he was setting up a small paper cemetery. He looked up, saw Felicity, and immediately grimaced. Ms. Harmon, he muttered. Mr. Devlin. She adjusted her oversized glasses. Are those case files or a paper craft for children? He sniffed. I've managed to put together a very clear narrative of the events. I'm thrilled for you. It's the witnesses I'm more worried about. At the bench, Judge Salver lifted his head, eyes glassy, then promptly blinked twice too slowly and slumped slightly forward again. A low, unmistakable snore rattled out across the courtroom. Felicity looked up. "Your Honor," she called out, "may I request a gentle nudge or perhaps a small trumpet?" Judge Salver jolted awake like a startled pigeon. "I'm awake. Completely aware. I was just resting my eyes." "Proceed." "You were dreaming about ham," she informed him. "You muttered something about gravy." He cleared his throat. "Bailiff, call the case." "The State of Ohio versus Freddie Palmer," the bailiff announced. Let's begin," the judge intoned, settling heavily into his chair once the jury was seated. "We are here in the matter of the State versus Freddie Palmer. Everyone ready?" Felicity stood. Ready, willing, and deeply concerned for the prosecution. Denard rose. "Ready, Your Honor." The judge squinted at him. "Are you?" "Yes." "Good. Proceed." Opening statements began with Denard droning on about stolen vehicles, public safety, and the importance of accountability. Felicity counted 3 factual errors and 1 mispronunciation before he reached his second paragraph. "The evidence will show that the defendant was captured on neighborhood security footage entering a blue 2008 Toyota Camry at approximately 3:17 p.m. This vehicle had been reported stolen by its owner, who left it unattended for under 2 minutes outside the Friendly Food Mart." "A Camry? And what kind of name is Friendly Food Mart?" Felicity muttered. "That store once sold me sour milk labeled as a seasonal option." Denard continued, ignoring her. "Furthermore, the defendant has a prior record which strongly suggests." "Objection." Felicity boomed. The judge previously gave strict instructions about such statements. "We are not playing the greatest hits of Freddie Palmer today. You don't get to remix his life into a dance track for the jury." "Sustained," the judge murmured, adjusting his glasses and fighting another nod off as he admonished the prosecutor. When her turn came, she stood slowly, dramatically, leaning on her cane. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, "this case is about assumptions. Dangerous assumptions. The assumption that blurry footage equals certainty. The assumption that a criminal record equals guilt. And most dangerously, the assumption that the state did its homework." She gestured gently toward Freddie. "My client is not perfect. If perfection were required, half this courtroom would be in chains, including, perhaps, the judge." Judge Salver stirred. "What?" "Nothing, Your Honor. Complimenting your alertness." A few jurors smiled. Felicity continued. "You will hear about a twin brother. However, you will not see him today." Denard leapt up. "Objection." "Sit down," Judge Salver snapped. "Let her talk." Felicity smiled sweetly. "Thank you, Your Honor. You see, the absence of this twin will bother you." "It should. Because absence creates doubt. And doubt is the bedrock of justice." She then sat. Denard sighed. "Very well. The prosecution will now call Mrs. Etta Chambers to the stand." A thin, sharp-eyed woman with a deep perm and a scowl that could curdle paint shuffled to the witness chair. "Mrs. Chambers," Denard began, "where were you on the afternoon of March 18th? "I was sittin' in my kitchen with my tea when I seen it through the window," she said proudly. "Seen what?" "That boy," she pointed at Freddie, "taking that car." Freddie leaned toward Felicity and whispered, "She don't even got her glasses on." She whispered back, "Shut up unless you want me to bring that up myself." Denard straightened. "Are you certain it was the defendant?" "Yes. I know that face." "Oh, you do?" Felicity approached calmly, cane tapping. "Tell me, Mrs. Chambers, did you know Freddie Palmer has a twin brother?" The woman blinked. "He got a twin?" "Claimed one, anyway." "Did anyone see the alleged twin that day?" "He looked just like him, don't he?" Felicity smiled like a cat who had just discovered an open creamery. That depends, Mrs. Chambers. Are you familiar with the subtle difference between identical and fraternal twins? Twins is twins, ain't they? Is grapefruit the same as an orange? Well, no. Then shut up while I demonstrate. As the morning wore on, Felicity chipped away at every certainty Denard tried to build. Times didn't match. Distances shifted. Descriptions changed. And still, no Jack. By lunch recess, Denard was sweating, the jury was engaged, and Felicity was just getting started. She leaned toward Freddie. If your brother doesn't show soon, I'm cross-examining the idea of him. Freddie gulped. He'll come. Felicity sighed. They always say that. Court adjourned for the day with Judge Salver nodding off mid-sentence and Felicity walking out smiling. The game had begun. And chaos, as always, was on her side. Chapter 6, A Twin, a Snore, and an Inconvenient Truth. Long before anyone ever said the words grand larceny in a courtroom, Freddie and Jack Palmer had learned a simple rule growing up in Youngstown. If you don't ask questions, you don't get answers you don't want. They weren't criminals by trade, not in the organized sense. They were survivors. Petty hustlers. Occasional screw-ups who understood that the city ran on favors, silence, and knowing when to walk away. The trouble started 6 months before the car theft case ever existed. It was Jack who met Terrell first. Terrell was the kind of man who always seemed to be leaning against something expensive he didn't own, a black SUV, a vintage motorcycle, a newly painted muscle car. He dressed well without looking flashy and spoke in calm, controlled sentences that made people listen. He found Jack behind the auto parts shop off Pierce Avenue. You know engines, Terrell had said casually. I need someone who can tell me what's worth fixing and what's worth selling. Jack, needing money and already halfway numb to bad decisions, agreed. At first, it was harmless. Or so it felt. Stripped doors. Missing radios. Cars brought in late at night and gone by morning. Jack told himself he wasn't stealing, he was just looking. Just advising. Just helping move things. He didn't ask where the cars came from. And Terrell never offered. Freddie found out by accident. He'd borrowed his sister's car one afternoon and followed Jack to the old service station on Pierce. What he saw unsettled him, the number of vehicles, the quiet efficiency, the way men moved with purpose instead of panic. He confronted Jack that night. This isn't flipping car parts, Freddie said. This is organized. Jack shrugged. Relax. Nobody's getting hurt. But Freddie didn't like the way Terrell watched people. Like he was measuring them. He backed out immediately. Too loudly. Too visibly. That was mistake number 1. Terrell didn't threaten him. Didn't raise his voice. He simply smiled and said, "You're family. Family doesn't walk away." A week later, Freddie's sister's car went missing. That was mistake number 2. Freddie panicked. He reported the car stolen. He didn't know that Terrell had moved it. But it wasn't about the car. It was about control. When Freddie started asking too many questions, Terrell saw opportunity. Let the system eat him instead. A guy with a record. A history. No credibility. Perfect. Jack realized too late that they were both in danger. He tried to distance himself, disappeared for days at a time, crashing on couches, avoiding phones. But Terrell made sure he understood the stakes. You testify, Terrell had said calmly one night, and your brother won't need a lawyer. He'll need a headstone. That was when Jack vanished for real. And when Jack heard Felicity Harmon's name, that Felicity Harmon, he realized something important. This wasn't just going to be a trial anymore. It was a chance out. So he walked into that courtroom late, heart pounding, knowing full well he didn't look a thing like his brother, and that might finally save them both. He didn't come to confuse the jury. He came to survive. And maybe, just maybe, to tell the truth. The second day of trial began with the sound of wood creaking, not the ancient courtroom benches, but the heavy door at the back of the courtroom opening far later than anyone expected. Every head turned. And in walked Jack. Freddie's breath hitched so sharply it sounded like a choke. Jack was taller. Broader. Built like someone who lifted heavy things and meant to. His hair was darker, his jaw sharper, his nose wider. A thin mustache hovered over his lip, the kind that suggested effort. The kind Freddie could never manage no matter how long he let things grow. The courtroom stalled in collective confusion as Jack slid into the bench behind Freddie and leaned forward. "Sorry I'm late," he muttered. "Bus broke down." Felicity didn't move at first. She simply watched him over the rims of her glasses, reading the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and unclenched. That wasn't stage fright. That was fear. The second day of trial began with the sound of wood creaking, not the ancient courtroom benches, but the heavy door at the back of the courtroom opening far later than anyone expected. Every head turned. And in walked Jack. Freddie's breath hitched so sharply it sounded like a choke. Jack was taller. Broader. Built like someone who lifted heavy things and meant to. His hair was darker, his jaw sharper, his nose wider. A thin mustache hovered over his lip, the kind that suggested effort. The kind Freddie could never manage no matter how long he let things grow. The courtroom stalled in collective confusion as Jack slid into the bench behind Freddie and leaned forward. "Sorry I'm late," he muttered. "Bus broke down." Felicity didn't move at first. She simply watched him over the rims of her glasses, reading the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and unclenched. That wasn't stage fright. That was fear. "Well," Mrs. Chambers said slowly, from half a block away, "I saw a blur and panic." "And your eyesight?" Felicity prompted. "Cataracts. But my doctor says I'm doing just fine." "Marvelous," Felicity said. No further questions. Denard sagged. But as the courtroom enjoyed its moment of levity, Felicity's eyes flicked back to Jack. He wasn't smiling. Because Jack knew something the room didn't. But Felicity didn't relax. Because she saw it, the flicker in Jack's eyes. The way he glanced toward the back doors. The way his hands trembled just slightly. Someone else was watching. Someone who didn't need to be in the room to be dangerous. And as Judge Salver drifted towards sleep and Denard tried to recover his dignity, Felicity felt the shape of the truth settling in her bones. This case was never about a stolen car. Chapter 7, The Video That Lies. The courtroom screens didn't like Felicity. They blinked. They fuzzed. They flickered at her with a faint, electronic defiance, as if even modern technology understood she was not a woman to be trusted with obedience. "Is this thing powered by coal?" she snapped, tapping the monitor with the rubber end of her cane. The bailiff fiddled with a cord. The screen went blue. Then green. Then it froze on an unflattering angle of Denard Devlin mid-blink, mouth slightly open, face locked in a confused half-yawn. "Pause it right there," Felicity said. "That is the most accurate footage we'll see all day." Snickers ran along the jury box. Denard frowned. "That image is highly prejudicial." "You walked into it," she replied sweetly. "With both feet." Judge Salver adjusted his robe and leaned forward. "Let's proceed before I slip back into my restricted nap hours." Denard cleared his throat. "The state would like to introduce Exhibit 4, security footage from the Friendly Food Mart taken at the time of the alleged theft." The screen changed, grainy and gray, as the timestamp appeared, 3:16 p.m. An outline of the front of the store came into focus. A grainy figure entered the frame, passed by the parked blue Honda, paused, looked around, got inside. Gasps rippled across the room. "Well, that certainly doesn't help our charm," Felicity muttered. The figure on the screen started the engine. The car rolled forward and disappeared off camera. Denard smiled for the first time all morning. At 3:17 p.m., the vehicle is clearly taken by a man matching the defendant's height, weight, and general appearance. He pressed pause and pointed at the frozen silhouette. There he is. The defendant. The courtroom fell quiet. Felicity stared at the image, lips pressed thin. Her mind stirred, not with panic, but calculation. It was blurry. Too grainy for features. Too dark for detail. And too still. This is what you're building your case on, Denard? A glorified shadow puppet? Miss Harmon, the resemblance is undeniable. That could be the Hamburglar for all we know. She stepped forward and squinted at the screen. Let's zoom, she demanded. The bailiff obeyed. The image ballooned, pixels breaking into jagged blocks. You see the shape of his face. His posture. Even the way he walks, Denard insisted. Oh please. Half of Youngstown walks like they owe money. Felicity turned to the jury. Allow me to demonstrate how stupid this argument is. She turned on her heel and called out, Jack. Stand up. Jack blinked. Me? Yes, you walking fire hydrant. He rose from the bench and stepped up beside the monitor. Felicity pointed to the blurred silhouette. Now Jack, please stand how this person stands. He mimicked the angled posture. Murmurs grew louder. Now Freddie, she snapped, stand the same way. Freddie copied him. From a distance, posture and silhouette eerily matched. That could be either of them, a juror whispered. Or you, Felicity said, gesturing at the bailiff. Or your cousin. Or your mailman. Or a man shaped like regret. Denard's confidence wobbled. But the clothing matches the defendant's known wardrobe. Grant me strength, Felicity said, looking at the ceiling. How many young men in Youngstown own a dark hoodie, jeans, and sneakers? Probably. All of them, Denard. That is the official town uniform. A confused chuckle rippled through the gallery. Judge Salver tried to hide a smile behind his hand and failed. Felicity clasped her hands behind her back and stepped closer to the screen. Now, let's look at the time stamp. 3:17 p.m. Yes. And when was Mr. Palmer's phone call made to his ex-girlfriend, the one who hates him and says he was standing in her driveway? Denard paused. 3:19 p.m. Mighty quick criminal work. 2 minutes from felony to heartbreak. That has to be a personal record. He could have driven while calling. Have you ever tried driving and talking to a bitter ex? It requires a safe environment and emotional preparation. The jury chuckled again. Denard turned to the judge. Your Honor, the jury is being influenced by theatrics. Judge Salver adjusted in his chair and squinted at the screen. It does look an awful lot like a blob, he admitted. A bad one. That's not my client, Felicity said. That's a mood. The bailiff leaned toward the judge and whispered something. Salver nodded. Ms. Harmon, it seems the security camera in question is known to lose resolution during temperature fluctuation. She cocked an eyebrow. Which means that on that particular day, the humidity in the store caused distortion. Felicity put a hand to her chest in fake despair. Oh, tragedy. A humid criminal. Denard rubbed his temple. Even with distortion, we have clear intent to steal. Intent is a thought. You can't arrest a thought unless you've got better surveillance than God. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. And I'd like to remind you, she continued, strolling toward the jury box now, no one saw Freddie inside the car. No fingerprints. No items were stolen from within it. No witness from up-close proximity. Nothing but an assumption stitched together with pixelated hope. Jack raised a hand. Also, Freddie can't drive a stick shift. The courtroom froze. What? Denard snapped. He cracked my clutch last year, Jack added. He don't know how. Felicity pivoted slowly toward Denard. And remind me, she said slowly, dangerously, what kind of transmission that Honda has. He shuffled through his notes, color draining from his face. Manual. Stick shift, is it not? Yes. A stunned hush filled the space. Well, of course, Felicity said brightly, throwing her hands up. That changes everything. My client doesn't steal cars, he kills them slowly through mechanical incompetence. Laughter burst free in the courtroom. Even the bailiff gave up trying to hide his grin. Judge Salver leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying himself now. Mr. Devlin, he said, do you have any additional proof that the defendant was the person in the video? Denard swallowed. Not at this time. Felicity clapped her hands together sharply. Then I would like to remind the court that imagination is not admissible evidence. A murmur of agreement rolled through the jurors. Judge Salver glanced at the clock, then promptly blinked 3 times too slowly. I propose we recess for lunch before I fall face first into this bench, he said. Court will reconvene at 1 o'clock sharp. The gavel fell. Freddie slumped in relief. Jack grinned. You safe for now, bro, he whispered. Felicity leaned toward Freddie and lowered her voice. For now. But I don't like for now. I like over and done with. And we're not there yet. What if they bring another witness after lunch? Freddie asked. Oh, they will. Guaranteed. When you corner a lazy prosecutor, they panic and start pulling rabbits out of hats that aren't even theirs. As the courtroom emptied, she watched Denard gathering his papers in frustrated silence. He wouldn't give up. And Felicity knew something else was coming. Something he'd been saving. Something he thought would finally shut her up. She tightened her grip on her cane. Let him try, she muttered. Because Felicity Harmon lived for nothing more than a good legal ambush. And she had a feeling. The next one was coming straight for her. Chapter 8, The Quiet Before the Storm. Denard Devlin stood as though rising required permission from his own knees. He smoothed his tie, a little too carefully, and cleared his throat in a way that suggested he hoped confidence might arrive if summoned loudly enough. High approached his next witness, who now sat in the witness box. Detective Harris, he began, you are currently assigned to the Auto Crimes Unit, correct? Yes, Harris replied, eyes forward. And you were the lead investigator in the matter involving the defendant, Freddie Calder? That's correct. Devlin nodded several times, as though confirming something only he could see. And in the course of your investigation, you found sufficient probable cause to make an arrest? Yes. No doubts. Harris hesitated. Devlin rushed in to save him. At the time. Yes, Harris said. At the time. Devlin smiled, a small, relieved smile, and turned slightly toward the jury. Thank you. No further. Felicity cleared her throat. Devlin stopped mid-sentence. The judge glanced at her. Miss Harmon. You'll have your turn. Of course, Your Honor, she said sweetly. I just wanted to make sure we were done pretending. A ripple of laughter slid through the gallery. Devlin stiffened. Objection. Sustained in spirit, Judge Salver said. But let her finish. Felicity nodded. Thank you. Mr. Devlin, you said Detective Harris found probable cause. I'm curious, how did he arrive at it? Devlin blinked. The witness already testified. I know, Felicity said pleasantly. I was there. I just want you to say it. Devlin shifted his stance. Through standard investigative procedures. Such as? Felicity asked. Devlin glanced at Harris. Reviewing evidence. Statements. Timelines. Which evidence? She pressed. Devlin's jaw tightened. The stolen vehicle. And what about it? She asked. Well, it was reported missing. By whom? The owner. And the owner is? Devlin hesitated. Harris cleared his throat. The owner is the defendant's sister. A murmur moved through the courtroom. Felicity smiled as if receiving a long-awaited gift. Ah. So the vehicle belonged to a family member. Yes, Devlin said quickly. But that doesn't negate theft. No, Felicity agreed. It doesn't. But it does complicate motive. She turned to Harris. Detective, did you investigate whether the vehicle had been borrowed before? No. Did you verify whether the owner had previously allowed her brother to use it? No. Did you ask whether she reported it stolen immediately? Harris hesitated. There was a delay. How long? Almost 12 hours. Felicity tilted her head. 12 hours is a long time to misplace a car you believe has been stolen. Devlin cut in. Objection, speculation. Overruled, Judge Salver said. She's asking about investigative steps. Felicity nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. She walked closer to the witness stand, cane tapping lightly. Detective, during that 12-hour window, did anyone else have access to the car? Yes. Who? Harris paused. Her boyfriend. And his name? Terrell. A murmur again, louder this time. Devlin stiffened. Objection, relevance. Overruled, said the judge, now fully awake. We're long past relevance. Felicity didn't look at Devlin. She kept her eyes on Harris. Did you investigate Terrell? Harris swallowed. Not directly. Why not? Harris hesitated too long. Devlin jumped in. Because there was no evidence. Felicity raised a finger. I didn't ask you. Devlin opened his mouth. Closed it. Harris exhaled. Because, it was suggested that we not pursue that angle. Suggested by whom? Harris's jaw tightened. The room leaned forward. Answer the question, Judge Salver said quietly. Harris's voice dropped. By someone above me. Felicity nodded slowly. And that suggestion came before or after you knew the defendant had a prior record? Harris didn't answer. She waited. The silence stretched. Finally, he said. Before. A ripple moved through the courtroom, not sound, but understanding. Devlin looked pale now. Felicity stepped back, letting the moment breathe. So, she said gently, you didn't follow the evidence. You followed instruction. Harris said nothing. She turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a case built on proof. She glanced at Devlin. It's built on convenience. Judge Salver rubbed his eyes. Somewhere in the gallery, someone exhaled a long, slow breath, the sound of a story finally starting to come apart. Court was recessed for 15 minutes, which Judge Salver announced by dropping his gavel and immediately drifting into what appeared to be a micronap. Felicity gathered her files and shuffled into the hallway, cane tapping in a rhythm she developed over decades, part balance, part warning. The courthouse smelled like old paper, floor cleaner, and institutional despair. She hated that smell. Jenny was supposed to be waiting near the vending machines, but she wasn't there. Instead, the corridor was quiet. Too quiet. Felicity felt it before she saw it. That sensation, like someone was standing just slightly out of view. Watching. Measuring. She stopped. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass of a trophy case commemorating a bowling league that had disbanded sometime during the Reagan administration. That's when she saw him. Not clearly. Not fully. Just a man at the far end of the hall, pretending to read a corkboard full of outdated notices. He wore a dark jacket. Too clean. Too intentional. When Felicity shifted her weight, he shifted too. Her pulse ticked up, not with fear, but recognition. I know this type, she thought. And he doesn't belong to the court. She took 2 deliberate steps forward. So did he. Then she did something that had unnerved prosecutors for decades. She smiled. Lovely building, isn't it? She called out pleasantly. All this charm and still no working coffee machine. The man didn't respond. He turned and walked away, not quickly, not nervously, but with the kind of casual confidence that suggested he had nothing to hide. And everything to hide. Felicity watched him disappear around the corner toward the rear exit. Her humor faded. She'd seen that walk before. Not in court. In police corridors. In holding rooms. In the men who never testified because they didn't need to. She leaned against the wall and exhaled slowly. That, she muttered, was not a court employee. Moments later, Jenny came hustling up with a vending machine coffee. "Sorry, boss." Line was brutal. "You look like you saw a ghost." "No," Felicity said softly. "Worse." She glanced toward the exit again. "Someone who sends ghosts." When Felicity returned to the courtroom, she was smiling again, warm, disarming, harmless. But inside, the pieces were locking into place. Jack hadn't been late because he was careless. He'd been late because someone had let him arrive. And that meant someone else was pulling strings. As Judge Salver stirred awake and Denard shuffled his notes, Felicity adjusted her glasses and whispered to herself. "All right, Terrell. Let's see how long you like the spotlight." The courtroom buzzed with low conversation as spectators filtered back in, but Felicity didn't return to her table right away. She found Jack standing near the water fountain, staring at it as if it might say something useful if he waited long enough. He startled when she spoke. "You look like a man deciding whether to run or throw up," she said gently. "I recommend neither. Both make a mess." Jack huffed a short, humorless laugh. "You always talk like that?" "Only when I'm worried," Felicity replied. She leaned on her cane beside him, her voice dropping. "Sit." He hesitated, then did. For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the lights filled the space between them. "You shouldn't have come today," Felicity said finally. "I know." His jaw tightened. "But I couldn't let him take the fall." "You already did," she said softly. "That's what this trial is." Jack swallowed. "You don't understand. He's not like me." He panics. I freeze. "I've noticed," she said dryly. "It's a family trait." That earned the ghost of a smile. Jack's hands trembled. "He told me not to come. Said it'd make things worse." "And yet," Felicity prompted. "And yet I keep seeing his face when they took him in." He looked up, eyes wet but steady. "I know what happens to guys like him in there. I've seen it. And I know what happens to people who cross Terrell." There it was. Felicity's expression didn't change, but something sharpened behind her eyes. "So you do know his name?" Jack exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. "I didn't mean to keep it from you. He doesn't introduce himself. He just appears. Makes things possible. Then impossible." Felicity nodded slowly. "Men like that believe silence is loyalty." Jack laughed bitterly. "He says it's survival." They stood quietly again. "You're afraid he'll come after you," Felicity said. Jack shook his head. "I'm afraid he already has." Felicity studied him. Not as a lawyer now, but as a woman who'd seen men unravel under pressure and watched others rise when it counted. "Listen to me," she said gently. "I've stood between powerful men and frightened ones for longer than you've been alive. They rely on fear. On isolation. On making you think you're alone." She leaned in just enough that only he could hear her next words. "You're not." Jack's breath hitched, he whispered. "I don't know how to do this." "You don't have to," she said. "That's my job." A bailiff cleared his throat down the hall. Felicity straightened, the courtroom mask sliding back into place. "One more thing," she added. "If anyone approaches you, anyone at all, you tell me. Immediately." Jack nodded. "And Ms. Harmon?" he asked. "Yes? If this goes bad." She cut him off with a gentle smirk. "It won't." Then, softer, but if it does, I've already planned 3 steps ahead. She tapped her cane once on the floor. Now come on. Let's go confuse a jury. Terrell didn't sit in the courtroom. He never did. He stood in the hallway outside, just beyond the double doors, leaning against the wall as if waiting for someone important, which, in his mind, he was. From here, he could hear the muffled rhythm of voices through the thick wood. Not words. Just movement. Energy. The rise and fall of momentum. He didn't need more than that. Terrell had spent years learning how to read rooms without entering them. A bailiff passed. Terrell nodded politely. The man nodded back without thinking, the same reflex everyone had around him. Terrell had that effect. Then the doors opened briefly. Jack stepped out. Just for a moment. And Terrell saw it. The tension in his shoulders. The stiffness in his jaw. The way his eyes flicked, searching. That was new. Jack had always been obedient in the quiet way. He didn't challenge. He absorbed. But now there was something else underneath, something fragile and dangerous. Hope. Terrell's jaw tightened. He's cracking. That was a problem. Because fear could be managed. Hope could not. When Jack looked up and their eyes met, the air changed. Terrell didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't threaten. He simply smiled, small, patient, practiced. The kind of smile that said, "I see you." Jack flinched. Just barely. But it was enough. Terrell turned and walked away, already planning. If Jack thought he could crawl out from under this thing, he was wrong. And if someone was helping him, well, that someone would need to be dealt with too. Back in the courtroom, Felicity was standing. She hadn't called a witness. She hadn't introduced evidence. She was simply talking. Which made Denard Devlin deeply uncomfortable. "Your Honor," Felicity said pleasantly, "before the state continues, I'd like to clarify a procedural issue." Judge Salver blinked awake. "Proceed," briefly. "Of course." She smiled. "I'd hate to tire anyone." A ripple of restrained laughter. Felicity paced once, slowly. "We've spent a great deal of time discussing what was taken, when it was taken, and who might have taken it," she said, "but I find it curious that we haven't discussed why." Denard frowned. "Motive is not required." "Oh, I know," Felicity interrupted gently. "But it's awfully informative." She turned toward the jury. "Let's talk about leverage." Denard stiffened. Felicity continued, voice calm, almost conversational. "In cases like this, cars don't just vanish. They move. And when they move, they usually do so because someone wants something in return." She held up a finger. "Sometimes it's money. Sometimes it's silence. And sometimes," she glanced toward the back of the courtroom, "it's obedience." Denard stood. "Objection. Speculation." Judge Salver hesitated. Felicity smiled sweetly. "I'm not speculating, Your Honor. I'm educating." "A beat." "Overruled," Salver muttered. "But move it along." Felicity nodded. "Thank you." She turned back to the jury. "You see, when someone is under pressure, real pressure, they don't behave logically. They hesitate. They disappear. They show up late to court." She paused. "They lie to protect people they love." Jack's breath caught. Felicity didn't look at him. Instead, she addressed the room. "So the question isn't whether my client stole a car." She let the silence stretch. "The question is who benefited from making it look that way." Denard swallowed. Somewhere in the gallery, a chair creaked. Felicity picked up her cane and tapped it once against the floor. "And I promise you," she said softly, "we are going to find out." Flashback, the night the car disappeared. It happened on a Tuesday. Not a dramatic night. Not stormy or loud. Just humid enough to make the air feel heavy and slow. Freddie had parked his sister's car on the side of Pierce Avenue, half a block from her apartment, the way he always did when he borrowed it. He remembered double-checking the lock. Remembered the soft chirp it made when he hit the button. Then he went upstairs and argued with his sister about groceries. That part stuck with him, the ordinariness of it. Later, long after midnight, the street changed. A black SUV rolled through without headlights, engine barely breathing. It stopped 2 houses down. Another car followed, older, duller, easier to ignore. 3 men stepped out. They didn't rush. They didn't whisper. They moved like people who knew exactly how much time they had. One of them, tall, calm, wearing a jacket too nice for the neighborhood, walked directly to the car. He didn't look around. He didn't hesitate. He pressed something into the door seam. The lock popped. The car alarm chirped once, a confused little sound, and went dead. A second man slid behind the wheel. The engine turned over smoothly. The third man stood watch, hands in his pockets, scanning the street with casual authority. From the shadow of a nearby porch, Jack watched. He hadn't meant to be there. He'd come by to talk to Freddie, to warn him that things were getting strange. But when he saw the SUV roll in, instinct told him to stay still. He recognized the man giving orders. Terrell. Jack's stomach dropped. Terrell didn't rush. He never rushed. He leaned down to the open driver's window and spoke quietly, words Jack couldn't hear but understood anyway. "You're doing fine. Take it slow." The car pulled away. Then Terrell did something that chilled Jack more than the theft itself. He looked directly toward the porch. Right at Jack. He didn't smile. He didn't scowl. He simply nodded, once, as if to say, "I know you're watching." Then he turned and walked back to the SUV. The vehicles disappeared down the block, leaving the street empty and silent again. Jack stayed frozen long after they were gone. Because now he understood something terrible. This wasn't theft. It was a message. That image replayed in Jack's mind as he sat in the courtroom now, the quiet confidence, the absolute lack of urgency. That was what terrified him. Not violence. Control. And as Felicity spoke, threading logic and doubt through the case, Jack realized something else. Terrell hadn't taken the car because he needed it. He'd taken it because he knew Jack would see it happen. And because he knew Jack would keep quiet. Until now. Felicity didn't look at Jack when the memory finished unspooling in his eyes. She looked past him. Past the jury. Past the judge. To the shape of the case itself. Something shifted, just a fraction, inside her chest. It wasn't triumph. It was alignment. She'd seen this pattern before, years ago, in a dockworker extortion case that never made the papers. Men who didn't steal. They delivered. Men who didn't plan crimes, they were placed inside them. And suddenly, everything that had bothered her since day one snapped into place. The timing. The location. The sloppiness that didn't match the precision. This wasn't incompetence. It was choreography. Felicity's grip tightened around her cane as she felt the click, the soundless moment when the law turns from a blunt object into a blade. The car wasn't stolen to be sold, she realized. It was stolen to be seen. Which meant the theft itself wasn't the crime being prosecuted. It was the lever. She glanced at the prosecution table. Denard Devlin was flipping through his notes, relaxed now, convinced momentum was on his side. Poor man. Felicity leaned in toward Jack, her voice barely a whisper. "Did the car get stripped?" she asked. Jack blinked. "No." "Chopped?" "No." "Parted out?" "No." "They just moved it." Felicity nodded once. That was all she needed. Because that meant the intent was never theft. And without intent. She straightened. The courtroom faded. In its place, Felicity saw her next move with perfect clarity. Mens rea. The silent killer of bad prosecutions. She stood. Your Honor, she said calmly, I'd like to revisit the timeline of the vehicle's recovery. Denard looked up, annoyed. We've already covered. Oh, I know, Felicity said pleasantly. But not the why. Judge Salver blinked. Proceed. Felicity paced slowly. The vehicle was taken, driven a short distance, and left intact. No attempt to sell it. No attempt to dismantle it. No attempt to disguise it. She turned to the jury. That's not theft. Denard stood. Objection. Overruled, the judge muttered, already drifting. She's got a point forming somewhere. Felicity smiled thinly. Stealing requires intent. Intent to permanently deprive. This? She tapped her cane once. This was a message. Murmurs. She let them breathe. Someone wanted leverage. Someone wanted fear. Someone wanted control. She turned slowly, deliberately, scanning the room, not looking for Terrell, but letting the idea of him settle into the air like smoke. And when control is the goal, she said quietly, the person holding the leash is rarely the one in handcuffs. The courtroom stilled. Jack swallowed hard. Felicity met his eyes just once. I've got you. Then she faced the judge again. Your Honor, she said, voice steady as stone, I will be asking this court to consider whether my client committed a crime, or whether he was placed inside one. A pause. Judge Salver blinked twice. Well, he said slowly, that's a new wrinkle. Felicity sat. Inside, she smiled. Because now she wasn't just defending Freddie. She was hunting Terrell. Pressure from above. The call came while Denard Devlin was in the men's room, staring at his reflection and trying to remember when his job had gotten so complicated. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He ignored it. It buzzed again. With a sigh, he answered. Devlin. There was a pause on the line, not silence, but breathing. Controlled. Measured. Assistant Prosecutor Devlin, the voice said. Calm. Professional. Not local. Yes? This is Special Agent Marla Reyes with the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation. Denard's stomach dipped. I need you in conference room C in 10 minutes, she continued. Bring the case file for State versus Palmer. All of it. He straightened. Is there a problem? Another pause. We're evaluating overlap. That was all she said before hanging up. Chapter 9. The long arm of the law. Conference room C was rarely used, which was why it smelled faintly of dust and old ambition. When Denard entered, two people were already there. One was Agent Reyes, sharp-eyed, composed, unreadable. The other he didn't recognize. The man stood near the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled up. He had the look of someone who'd spent a career being listened to. Mr. Devlin, the man said, turning. I'm Deputy Director Collins. Internal Review. Denard's mouth went dry. We have reason to believe, Collins continued, that a regional theft operation has been using low-level defendants as insulation. Denard frowned. I'm not following. Reyes slid a folder across the table. Photos. Surveillance stills. License plates. A familiar black SUV. We've been tracking a network moving vehicles across county lines, she said. We believe your current defendant was used as a pressure point. Denard flipped through the pages, heart pounding. This case was handed to me, he said. I didn't. We know, Collins cut in. That's why you're still standing. Denard swallowed. Reyes leaned forward. What we need to know is whether anyone in your courthouse has been compromised. Denard hesitated. Faces flickered through his mind. Then, inevitably, one name hovered at the edge of thought. Terrell. He swallowed again. I don't have proof, he said carefully. But there's a person. Always adjacent. Never named. Collins nodded. That's usually how it starts. Reyes closed the folder. Until today. Back in the courtroom. Felicity felt it before she saw it, that subtle shift in energy when the rules change. The doors at the back opened. Two unfamiliar figures, a man and a woman, stepped inside and took seats in the last row. Not spectators. Observers, law enforcement types. She didn't look at them directly. She didn't need to. She felt the air thicken. Judge Salver noticed too. He straightened, suddenly alert. Denard returned to the prosecution table looking pale. Felicity leaned toward him slightly. You look like a man who just discovered gravity still works, she murmured. He didn't answer. Across the room, Jack felt it as well, the pressure changing, like weather before a storm. And somewhere, not far away, Terrell realized something had gone wrong. Not yet catastrophic. But different. For the first time since this began, the game was no longer his alone. 2 weeks earlier, BCI, Bureau of Criminal Investigation, had quietly requested files from the county clerk's office, a narrow batch. Vehicle recovery reports. Chain of custody documentation. A paper trail that would have gone unnoticed if someone hadn't been paying attention. Someone was. Because within 24 hours of that request, the CHOP operation shifted locations. That didn't happen by accident. Someone inside the system had warned them. The courthouse felt different after lunch. Not louder. Not tenser. Quieter. The kind of quiet that happens when people stop talking because they know someone is listening. Felicity felt it in her bones. She was reviewing her notes when she noticed it, a man standing near the clerk's office, pretending to scroll through his phone. He'd been there earlier too. She hadn't clocked him at first because he looked exactly like what he was meant to be, forgettable. Mid-40s. Badge clipped to his belt. Plain suit. No urgency. But something about him nagged at her. He didn't watch the courtroom. He watched people. And more specifically, he watched who watched whom. That was when she saw it. The man adjusted his stance and whispered something into his sleeve. Felicity's jaw tightened. There you are. She leaned toward Denard, keeping her voice low. Your friend by the records office, she murmured. He always worked this courtroom? Denard followed her gaze, then stiffened. That's Officer Glenn Wirtz, he said quietly. County liaison. Felicity's eyebrow arched. Liaison to whom? Denard didn't answer. Because he already knew. Felicity suddenly had a realization. Wirtz had access. Access to evidence logs. Access to scheduling. Access to sealed warrants. And most importantly, access to who was being watched. Which meant Terrell didn't need informants on the street. He had one in the building. Felicity's mind raced. That explained everything. How Terrell always knew when to move. Why Jack was warned before raids. Why pressure appeared at exactly the right moments. Why this case kept sliding just out of reach. The machine wasn't broken. It was being fed. Across the room, Wirtz glanced up and met Felicity's eyes. Just for a second. His mouth twitched, not a smile, not a threat. A confirmation. She gave him nothing in return. Just a slow blink. I see you. And in that moment, she knew two things with certainty. One, the case had just become far more dangerous. And two, Terrell was no longer the biggest problem. Because Terrell was careful. Moles get desperate when the ground shifts beneath them. As court recessed again, Felicity felt a presence beside her. Careful, counselor, a voice murmured. It was Wirtz. You don't want to chase shadows. She didn't look at him. Oh, sweetheart, she replied lightly, I don't chase shadows. She picked up her cane. I turn on the lights. And she walked away. Felicity didn't move quickly. That was her first advantage. People mistook her slowness for age. For confusion. For harmlessness. It made them careless. She waited until the courthouse settled into its afternoon rhythm, when clerks resumed typing, attorneys argued softly in hallways, and everyone assumed the day's tension had passed. Only then did she act. She shuffled toward the clerk's desk with a file tucked loosely under her arm. Not the real file, that one was locked in her bag, but a thin decoy, stuffed with old motions and photocopies. "Excuse me, dear," she said pleasantly, "I'm missing a timestamp from the discovery log. I'd hate to make the judge grumpy." The clerk smiled sympathetically. "Of course, Miss Harmon. Which case?" Felicity leaned in and lowered her voice just enough to feel conspiratorial. "State versus Palmer. But please, I don't want this circulated yet. It's sensitive." She watched carefully. The clerk nodded and reached for the computer. Across the room, Officer Wirt stiffened. Just slightly. Barely noticeable. But Felicity saw it. She thanked the clerk, made a show of shuffling papers, and wandered to a bench near the vending machines. She sat. Waited. Counted breaths. 3 minutes later, Wirt stepped into the hallway. Not rushing. Just checking something. Felicity smiled to herself. She pulled out her phone and sent a single text, not to anyone official, not to BCI, not even to Jenny. To an old favor. Felicity. Need eyes on courthouse exits. Quietly. Now. The reply came seconds later. Unknown. Already there. Felicity didn't smile. She watched. And right on cue, Wirtz returned, but this time his posture was wrong. Tense. Alert. He glanced at his phone. Then toward the stairs. Then back toward the courtroom. He's checking to see if someone moved, she realized. Which meant someone had. And that someone wasn't supposed to. Moments later, Felicity heard it, the soft echo of hurried footsteps coming from the record's wing. Not running. But close. She leaned toward a nearby deputy. "Young man," she said kindly, "would you mind checking whether someone left the records room unlocked? I'm terribly forgetful." The deputy nodded and headed off. 30 seconds later he returned, face tight. "Ma'am, someone's been in there." Felicity inhaled slowly. "That's what I was afraid of." Wirtz reappeared at the end of the hall, too fast. Too controlled. Too late. His eyes met Felicity's again. This time, there was no smugness. Only calculation. He knew. She knew. And now they both knew that the other knew. Felicity rose, tapping her cane softly against the floor. She didn't accuse. She didn't confront. She simply said, pleasantly, "Busy day, officer." Wirtz forced a smile. "You have no idea." She tilted her head. "Oh, I think I do." Then she walked past him, slowly, deliberately, and whispered just loud enough for him to hear. "Careful who you warn next." As Felicity disappeared down the hallway, Wirtz exhaled sharply. He pulled out his phone. Typed. Deleted. Typed again. And somewhere, far from the courthouse, Terrell's phone lit up. Detective Marla Reyes. The impound lot sat at the edge of the city like a forgotten graveyard, rows of tired vehicles baked pale under the afternoon sun. Chain-link fences crowned with razor wire shimmered in the heat, and a portable guard booth stood crooked near the entrance. Detective Marla Reyes parked across the street, engine idling as she watched the lot through the windshield. "That's the one," Freddie murmured from the passenger seat, nodding toward a faded blue sedan tucked between a rusted pickup and a dented delivery van. "That was the first car they took, the one I saw them driving." Marla studied the car. From a distance it looked ordinary. Too ordinary to have caused as much chaos as it had since its sudden disappearance several months earlier. But she knew better than to underestimate metal and rubber. Vehicles were just shells, it was the hands behind the wheel that told the real story. "You're certain?" she asked. "Positive," Freddie replied. "There's a scratch on the rear bumper. Looks like a sideways S." Marla tipped her chin up, eyes narrowing. A private impound lot was a strange place for a stolen car to end up, especially one tied to a string of thefts now spanning multiple neighborhoods. Typically, vehicles recovered after theft were routed through city impound, cataloged, and kept under strict documentation. This place felt different. "Off the record. Let's take a walk," Marla said, cutting the engine. They crossed the street and approached the front gate. The guard, a burly man in a wrinkled uniform shirt, looked up from his phone with mild irritation. "Public pickup is closed," he grunted. "Come back Monday." "I'm not here for pickup," Marla replied, calmly flashing her badge. "Detective Reyes. I need access to the lot and your intake reports for the last 30 days. His posture shifted immediately. The irritation melted into wariness. "You should have called ahead." "Should have, yes. But then you'd have had time to get rid of anything you don't want me to see." Her tone was flat, unreadable. He studied her for a moment, then glanced at Freddie. Something tight moved in his jaw. "Wait here," he muttered and disappeared into the booth. Freddie exhaled slowly. "He knows something," he whispered. "Oh, I know," Marla replied. "They always do." A minute later, the gate buzzed and creaked open. 10 minutes, the guard said. "That's all I can do for you." "That's generous," Marla replied, pushing the gate and stepping inside. The smell of oil, hot rubber, and decay thickened the air as they walked down the uneven gravel aisle. The blue sedan came into clearer view. The sideways S on the bumper was faint but visible, like a fingerprint on a crime scene. "We need to check the plates," Marla said. She crouched at the rear of the vehicle. The license plate didn't match what was on record. It was the right style, right state, but the numbers were wrong. "Someone swapped it," she muttered. Freddie's eyes widened. Why would they do that if the car was already here? "Because it wasn't supposed to be here," she replied. "This is a hiding spot. Not a holding place." Marla stepped to the driver's side, peering through the dusty window. The interior was messy but not ransacked. No shattered glass, no obvious signs of forced entry. That meant whoever took it had a key, or the owner knew them. Her stomach tightened at the thought. "When your sister's car disappeared, do you know anyone who might have had access to her keys?" she asked. Freddie hesitated. "There was a guy she dated for a while. Name's Terrell. She ended things a month before the car went missing. He was always around the house. Said he liked working on engines, but he never actually fixed anything." "Do you know where he lived?" "Not exactly," he said. "But he hung around off Pierce Avenue, near the old service station." That name rang a bell in Marla's memory. Pierce Avenue had popped up in 2 other reports tied to stolen cars stripped for parts and reassembled with falsified IDs. She stood and moved around the sedan's hood, running her fingers beneath the edge. Something sharp brushed her skin, a thin device taped to the undercarriage. She carefully peeled it loose. A GPS tracker. Her eyes flicked to Freddie. "Bait," Marla replied. "That's their MO, someone steals a car, parks it here, changes the plates, and tracks who comes near it. That means the thieves aren't just looking for random rides, they're studying people." Freddie's face paled. "So, are they watching us too?" "Yes," Marla said simply, slipping the tracker into an evidence bag. "But the good news? They don't realize we just figured it out." A car engine suddenly turned over at the far end of the lot. Marla's head snapped up. A dark SUV crawled down one of the aisles, moving too slow to be casual. The guard was nowhere in sight. "We need to leave," Marla said under her breath. "Now." They turned and began walking, not running, back toward the gate. The SUV rolled closer, windows tinted black. Freddie's heartbeat thundered in his ears. "Detective," he whispered. That's the same SUV we saw 2 nights ago. Marla glanced sideways at it, memorizing the shape, the plates, the subtle dent in the front grille. Then congratulations, she said calmly. You just confirmed our suspect isn't as careful as he thinks. They stepped through the open gate and onto the sidewalk just as the SUV paused at the end of the aisle, idling, watching them. The guard reappeared in the booth, eyes wide, pretending nothing was wrong. Marla didn't look back. Things just turned very interesting, Freddie muttered. She nodded once. And very dangerous. Across the street, her phone vibrated. A new message flashed on the screen. Unknown number. You're getting close. Stop. Marla locked the phone, eyes hardening. No, she whispered. Now I'm going all the way in. The message stayed with Marla long after the screen went dark. You're getting close. Stop. Threats came with the job. Most of them were loud, messy, designed to scare. This one was quiet. Controlled. That bothered her more than anything else. She drove with both hands locked on the steering wheel, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds. Freddie sat rigid in the passenger seat, scanning every passing car as if one might suddenly veer toward them. Do you want to head back to the station? He asked. No, Marla replied. If they took the time to warn me, that means I'm standing in the right place. We're going to Pierce Avenue. He swallowed. That's where Terrell used to hang around. Exactly. The farther they drove from the city's polished center, the more the streets decayed into cracked pavement and abandoned storefronts. Old gas stations slumped like tired bodies. Liquor stores were boarded up. The air smelled stale, mixed with faint traces of oil and rust. Pierce Avenue stretched ahead like a scar. That's it, Freddie said quietly. That's the old service station up there. Marla slowed the car. The station was fenced off, half collapsed, its sign hanging crooked with a faded red gas barely visible. Overgrown weeds pushed through the concrete. But something about the building felt wrong. Too untouched. People don't abandon places like this and keep them this clean, she muttered. She parked across the street but didn't get out yet. Stay here, she told Freddie. If anything goes wrong, you hit 911 and you don't wait. And if they come toward me? Then you drive. I don't care where. Just get away. He didn't like the answer, but he nodded. Marla stepped out, the afternoon sun baking down on her shoulders. She crossed the street, pushing open a rusted gap in the fence. It screeched low and bitter. Inside, the air was thick and still. The concrete floor was littered with broken bottles, old rags, and cigarette butts, but recent ones. Less than a day old. Someone had been here. She moved carefully, scanning shadows, hand resting just inches from her firearm. Pigeons fluttered from the rafters as she stepped deeper into the structure. Then she saw it. In the back, partially hidden by a collapsed shelf, sat the stripped skeleton of a car. No plates. No seats. Just the frame and pieces of the engine left behind like bones. This is a chop shop, she whispered. Not just for one vehicle. There were parts stacked beside the walls, tires, bumpers, doors, even car radios piled into plastic crates. All organized. Labeled. A business, not a random operation. She reached for her phone, snapping quick, silent photos. A low sound made her freeze. Footsteps. Not one set. At least two. Marla moved fast, ducking behind a pillar as the voices crept closer. You sure no one followed you? A man muttered. Positive, another replied. Been clean for weeks. Yeah. And that detective hasn't come sniffing around since yesterday. A tight chill moved down Marla's spine. They were talking about her. She leaned just enough to see them. Two men stood near a workbench. One tall and lean, the other thick and heavy-set with a tattoo crawling up his neck. The taller one turned slightly, and Marla's jaw clenched. Terrell. Even after weeks, she recognized him from the old photos Freddie had shown her. Same sharp cheekbones. Same restless eyes. "She's gonna be a problem," Terrell said. "Cop with too much time and not enough fear. We handle it if she comes back." "No," Terrell snapped. "No bodies. That's too loud. This stays clean. Quiet." "So what? We just pause everything?" "For now," Terrell said. "We let her think she's won something. Then we move the rest across town. Different lots. Different faces." Marla's pulse hammered in her ears. This was the confirmation she needed, proof of an organized theft ring. She shifted her weight. A piece of glass crunched under her shoe. The voices stopped instantly. "Did you hear that?" the heavy one asked. "Yeah." Boots turned in her direction. "Who's there?" Terrell called out, his voice suddenly sharp. Marla stepped from behind the pillar, her weapon raised. "Detective Reyes," she said, clear and controlled. "No one move." Surprise flashed across their faces, then calculation. Terrell's lips curved into a half-smile. "You really don't know when to stop, do you?" he said. "Put your hands up." Slowly. Neither of them moved. Instead, Terrell glanced past her toward the open side of the station. In one quick motion, the heavy-set man bolted. "Hey!" Marla shouted, but Terrell lunged at the same time. The world erupted into chaos, metal clanging, feet scrambling, dust flying. Marla barely sidestepped him, slamming the butt of her gun into his shoulder. He grunted, staggering back. "Don't." Freddie's voice suddenly echoed from outside. Marla's heart dropped. "Get back in the car," she yelled. Terrell smirked through the pain. "Your little friend didn't listen." Through the cracked opening, she saw the dark SUV from the impound lot idling across the street once again. And this time, another figure stood beside it. The same guard from the lot. Working together. Marla tightened her grip on her weapon. "You're all connected," she said coldly. Terrell's smile widened. "Bigger than you think, detective." Sirens pierced the air in the distance, faint but growing louder. Freddie must have called them after all. Terrell's expression shifted, annoyance now replacing confidence. "This isn't over," he muttered. He darted back, slipping through a side exit behind a stack of demolished shelving. The heavy-set man was already gone. Marla chased 2 steps, then stopped. She wasn't running blind into a trap. Instead, she stepped back into the open space, raising her gun once more just as uniformed police cars began flooding Pierce Avenue from both ends, lights slashing blue and red over the decaying buildings. Freddie ran to her side. "You okay?" "Yeah," she breathed. But the real game just started. She looked down at the photos on her phone, the evidence, the parts, the organization of the entire operation. "They're not just stealing vehicles," she said. "They're moving them. Rebuilding them. Selling them. And your brother Jack got caught too close to the truth." Freddie's face hardened with a mix of fear and determination. "Then let's finish it." Marla looked back at the broken station, the collapsing walls hiding secrets that were only beginning to surface. "Oh, we will," she said. "And we're going to take down every last one of them." As officers flooded the scene, securing what they could, Marla glanced once more at Pierce Avenue. She didn't see Terrell anywhere. But she felt his eyes on her all the same. Chapter 10, Felicity does not appreciate being ignored. Felicity Harmon was not built for subtlety. She was built for courtrooms, chaos, and coffee so strong it could remove varnish from a dining table. Which is why, when she turned on the 6 o'clock local news and saw the words, "Detective leads raid on chop shop connected to vehicle theft ring," she nearly choked on her biscotti. "Detective?" she barked at her dusty office television. "Detective? What detective? Where in the name of Clarence Darrow did a detective come from in my case, and why is she talking to my client?" The screen filled with images of flashing red and blue lights, police tape fluttering in the breeze, and a young woman with her back turned giving a statement to a reporter. Dark hair. Purposeful stance. Confident posture. The news anchor's voice floated out, self-important and thrilling. Detective Marla Reyes of the Youngstown Police Department uncovered an organized network of vehicle theft and illegal auto sales. Felicity leaned closer to the screen, nose nearly touching the glass. Reyes. Reyes, oh for heaven's sake, she muttered. I knew someone was doing my legwork and didn't bother to send me the bill. Jenny burst into the room seconds later in a whirlwind of hairspray and paperwork. Have you seen this? She cried, eyes wide as saucers. Your Freddie boy isn't just a dumb thief. He's connected to a full-blown criminal empire. He is connected to a bad haircut and unresolved commitment issues, that much I know, Felicity snapped. But no one informs me of a raid in my case without at least offering a bagel. On television, the camera panned again, damaged vehicles, detached doors, piles of tires, and finally a photograph that made Felicity sit down hard in her chair. Terrell. She didn't know him personally, but she recognized that face from the case file. So that's your mystery man, she murmured. Jenny leaned over her shoulder. Do you think this helps or hurts us? Felicity adjusted her glasses and smiled slowly. A dangerous kind of smile. Oh, it helps us enormously, because now we aren't just defending one idiot. We're walking into an entire conspiracy, and conspiracies are messy. And guess who thrives in mess? You? Jenny replied. Me, Felicity confirmed proudly. The office phone rang a moment later. Felicity snatched it up. If this is the IRS, I've passed away and left everything to a parrot. A woman's voice answered, calm and professional. Ms. Harmon? This is Detective Marla Reyes. I think we need to speak. Felicity's eyebrows lifted. Well, honey, I've been thinking the exact same thing. A brief laugh on the other end. I'm guessing you saw the news. I saw more than that, you with my client. I also saw a missing puzzle piece finally reveal its ugly mug. You knew more than you let on in court today. I always do, Felicity replied. A pause. Can I come by your office? I don't think this is a conversation that should happen over the phone. Detective, Felicity said, standing all ready, I have tea, questionable biscotti, and a secretary who prays for gossip. By all means, come on over. 20 minutes later, Marla stood in the doorway of Felicity's cluttered office, taking in the crooked paintings, the cat calendar, and the towering stacks of legal books dating back to the Carter administration. So, you're the legend, Marla said. I prefer urban myth with a law license, Felicity responded. Sit. You look like someone who hasn't slept since the Reagan era. Marla sat, exhaling as if she'd been carrying the weight of the city on her shoulders. You were right about Freddie not telling you everything. That boy wouldn't tell the truth if it came with a parade, Felicity said. What exactly did you find and why have you been talking to my client without my knowledge? Or permission? Marla slid photos across the desk, stripped cars, serial numbers scratched clean, fake titles, burner phones. I needed his expertise plus it's bigger than him. Way bigger. His sister. Terrell, he was involved with a theft ring. Freddie knew something was happening, but I don't believe he ever understood the scale. And Jack? Felicity asked, already knowing the answer. Jack is connected, Marla replied bluntly. He's been ghosting law enforcement for weeks. Every time we get close, he disappears. Marla leaned forward. I want Freddie to testify. A silence dropped into the room like a brick in water. I make that decision, not you, Felicity said simply. We're on the same side. I think he should, if it keeps him alive. Her words settled heavily. You think they'll kill him? I think they'll do whatever keeps him quiet. Felicity tapped her cane thoughtfully on the floor. Well, they better get in line, because I'm his lawyer and I get first crack at him emotionally. Jenny poked her head in. Should I cancel your manicure appointment tomorrow? I don't need a manicure, but I might need a miracle, Felicity said. Clear my schedule. Marla stood. Tomorrow, I'm formally recommending witness protection in exchange for cooperation. If Freddie agrees, your case turns into a blockbuster. And if he doesn't? Then the entire ring will do everything in its power to silence him. Felicity's eyes glittered with fire. Well, she said, pushing up from her chair, I've never been particularly fond of bullies. Especially organized ones. She grabbed her handbag and cane. Where's Freddie now? County holding, for his protection. Well, Felicity said. I'm feeling social. Marla blinked. Right now? Yes, right now. You don't let fear get settled. It starts redecorating if you do. As they headed for the door, Felicity paused at her desk, glancing at a small framed photograph of the cats from the shelter. Behave yourselves, gentlemen, she said to the empty room, as if the walls were listening. Lex Talionis has nothing on me. Marla smirked. I'm starting to understand your win rate. Oh honey, Felicity said. You haven't seen anything yet. Outside, the air buzzed with tension. Police sirens echoed faintly in the distance. The city held its breath. And somewhere in the shadows, Terrell was still watching. The game had changed. And Felicity Harmon, septuagenarian, irreverent, and unstoppable, was just getting warmed up. Chapter 11, Courtroom Chaos and Canine Interruptions. Felicity Harmon arrived at the courthouse the next morning feeling like a general preparing for battle. Her cane tapped a rhythm of authority against the scuffed tile floors as she navigated the narrow hallways, stacks of case files under one arm, oversized glasses perched precariously on her nose. Morning, Miss Harmon, the bailiff said. Morning, boy. And yes, I will beat you at that spelling bee if you insist on calling me morning, instead of your honor's nightmare. He just blinked. She ignored him. Inside the courtroom, Denard Devlin was already fuming. He had his notes spread out like a battlefield map, coffee in one hand, and a perpetual scowl carved deep into his features. Judge Salver was, of course, already nodding off, one hand holding a thick law tome over his face. Objection. Felicity barked as she approached the bench. The judge startled awake, knocking his glasses crooked. Respectfully, Your Honor, please don't help me lose my case by fainting again. Judge Salver blinked, cleared his throat, and muttered something about being conscious enough to nod. Freddie sat at the defense table, jittery as ever, and beside him, Jack, still taller, broader, and more inconveniently different from his brother than anyone could have imagined, shuffled papers nervously. The gallery murmured in anticipation. Today wasn't just a trial. Today was a performance, and Felicity planned to steal the show. Felicity rose from her chair. Your Honor, the defense recalls Ms. Etta Chambers to the stand. Ah yes, Felicity muttered under her breath. The one who mistook Freddie for a moving silhouette in a poorly lit alley, yes. Let's see how she does today. Etta Chambers shuffled in, hair perfectly permed, eyes wide with a sense of self-importance only a lifelong small-town witness could muster. Felicity leaned on her cane, studying her like a hawk. Miss Chambers, Felicity began, voice dripping with sweet menace, do you have any visual impairments? Etta blinked. Well, yes, but... Cataracts? Felicity interrupted. Glasses? Blind spots? Confusion due to weather? Etta fumbled. Well, yes. Exactly, Felicity declared. So, tell me again how you could possibly identify my client from the 3:17 p.m. security footage at Friendly Food Mart, a footage so blurry it looked like a moving jelly bean. The jury giggled. Denard's jaw tightened. Objection. Argumentative. Already asked and answered. Overruled, the judge mumbled, still adjusting his drooping eyelids. Just as Felicity turned to her next line of questioning, a loud bark echoed through the courtroom. A chorus of yelps followed by tiny paws scuttling across the floor. What the? Denard started. A small, Scruffy Terrier ran between the benches, jumping onto the defense table, knocking over a cup of water and sending papers flying. It yipped once, barked again, then trotted happily toward Felicity. "Your Honor," Felicity said, stooping to pick up the dog, "I present Exhibit A, the first member of my defense team." Freddie blinked. "That's a dog?" "Yes," Felicity said, cradling the terrier. "He has better instincts than the entire prosecutor's office combined." The dog barked again, hopping into her arms. Felicity turned to Etta Chambers. "Now, do you recognize this dog?" Etta squinted. "No." "Exactly," Felicity said, setting the dog down carefully. "Because it wasn't there, just like your ability to reliably identify a man half a block away through a blurry camera." The jury laughed. Judge Salver attempted to hide a smile but failed miserably. Denard threw his papers down in frustration. Felicity turned her attention to Jack. "Jack, I need you to explain something to these fine people." Jack looked confused. "Me? Explain what?" "Explain how your face is completely different from Freddie's." I don't know what to say," Jack stammered. "Exactly. And now, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Felicity said, spinning theatrically, "you see that a man can claim a twin and yet have no resemblance whatsoever. And anyone who insists otherwise, clearly needs corrective lenses and a basic course in biology." The jurors chuckled again. Even Judge Salver snorted. Denard rose one final time, red-faced. "This courtroom is a circus." "Yes," Felicity agreed, adjusting her glasses and leaning heavily on her cane. "And I, dear prosecutor, am the ringleader." She glanced at Freddie. "Remember, son, the only thing more dangerous than a guilty verdict is a lawyer with nothing to lose and a dog on her side." The terrier yipped in agreement. Outside the courtroom, the city held its breath, oblivious to the chaos within. Inside, Felicity was just getting started. Because in Youngstown, law wasn't about papers or rules. It was about presence, persistence, and occasionally, pets who could bark at bad witnesses. And Felicity? She had all three. Chapter 12, The Verdict and the Victory. The courtroom was unusually silent that morning, the kind of silence that only precedes either brilliance or disaster. Felicity Harmon sat at the defense table, cane propped beside her. Oversized glasses perched precariously on her nose, and Freddie and Jack nervously shuffling papers in front of her. The jurors were already seated, alert and unusually focused, a good sign in Felicity's experience, though she suspected it was more due to the sheer absurdity of the preceding days than her charm. Denard Devlin sat across from her, slumped slightly in his chair, nursing a coffee that had long since gone cold. He looked like a man who had been through 3 consecutive tornadoes and still had a stack of unfinished paperwork to mourn. Judge Salver tapped his gavel, eyes half closed. "Let's proceed. The jury is ready for closing statements." Felicity stood, taking a slow, deliberate breath. She tapped her cane once against the floor, and the echo resonated through the courtroom like a drum roll. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice carrying the authority of a small army, "we've been through a lot together these past days. We've seen blurry videos, questionable witnesses, and, yes, even a very opinionated dog. But the matter at hand is simple. Can you, in good conscience, convict a man based on half-truths, assumptions, and a series of coincidences that unravel faster than a cheap sweater?" The jury leaned in, some smiling, clearly enjoying the theatrical delivery. Felicity clicked her tongue. "My client, Freddie Palmer, is a young man with a colorful past, admittedly so. But this case? This so-called grand larceny? There is no proof, no reliable witness, and no credible evidence that he is guilty of the crime as charged." She paused, letting the words sink in. "We have a video so blurry it could be an impressionist painting of a man taking a car. We have a witness who, bless her heart, cannot reliably distinguish one human being from another half a block away. And we have a prosecutor so desperate to secure a conviction that he ignored the obvious: my client cannot drive a stick shift." A few jurors chuckled, and Felicity smiled, enjoying the rhythm of her argument. Furthermore, we have the presence of a twin brother, not identical, mind you, but claimed by the defendant to create reasonable doubt, who, when finally revealed, proves that even the prosecution's narrative is riddled with inconsistencies. She gestured toward Jack. Ladies and gentlemen, this man is not my client. This man is his brother. And anyone who cannot see the difference? Well, they should never be trusted to identify anything beyond their own reflection. Turning back to the jury, Felicity lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Finally, let's not forget the cat-and-mouse game that unfolded behind the scenes. Vehicles moved, conspiracies emerged, and organized crime nearly made my client a scapegoat. But the truth, dear jurors, is often a quiet, stubborn thing that refuses to be framed by flimsy evidence or courtroom theatrics. She raised her cane dramatically. Freddie Palmer did not steal the car in question. Freddie Palmer did not engage in the crime as alleged. And now, after all this chaos, all this drama, and all this nonsense, it is your duty to recognize what is clear. A man should not be punished for circumstances he did not create. With a deep bow, she returned to her seat. Freddie's shoulders relaxed slightly, and even Jack allowed himself a small, grateful grin. Denard groaned, muttering something about circus acts under his breath. Judge Salver, miraculously awake, banged his gavel. Very well, the judge said. The jury will now deliberate. Felicity leaned back, cane across her lap, and allowed herself a small, victorious smile. She glanced at Freddie. You did well, son. Just, maybe don't promise any more twins in court, okay? Freddie shook his head. I swear, Felicity, I didn't know he'd be that different. Oh, they're never identical, dear, she replied. And that, my boy, is why I'm the lawyer and you are, well, let's just say you're charming in a legally irrelevant way. Hours passed. Felicity spent the time rearranging her piles of case files, sipping bitter coffee, and occasionally giving the court stray terrier, who had once again appeared mysteriously, a gentle pat. Finally, the jury filed back in. The foreperson stood. Your Honor, she said, voice steady, we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. The courtroom erupted. Freddie hooped, Jack nearly toppled from his chair, and Felicity adjusted her glasses, savoring the sweet relief that only a long-fought legal victory could provide. Judge Salver banged the gavel as he thanked the jury. Denard sat slumped, scowling, muttering something about unbelievable luck and this is ridiculous. Felicity leaned down toward Freddie and whispered, luck? Honey, luck is for amateurs. Skill, cunning, and a healthy dose of chaos, that's what wins cases. Freddie laughed. I'll take it. Jack shook her hand. Thanks. You're welcome, Felicity said, though the gesture felt like a formality. She didn't need thanks. She needed results, and today, she had them. As they left the courtroom, Felicity paused in the hallway, looking back at the room that had been her battlefield. Judge Salver nodded off again in the corner, Denard muttered into his coffee cup, and the dog, inexplicably, trotted happily by her side. She smiled. This was why she loved being a lawyer. The unpredictability, the chaos, the absolute certainty that something would go wrong, and then the miraculous, irreverent way it all came together. Outside, the Youngstown sun shone over the streets, promising new cases, new mischief, and new adventures for the septuagenarian lawyer who refused to be ignored, underestimated, or outdone. Felicity hoisted her bag, tapped her cane, and announced to the world, or at least to the small circle of supporters and cats that seemed to follow her everywhere. Justice is served. Now, someone fetch me a very large slice of pie. The dog barked in agreement. And so, the case of the blue Honda, the missing twin confusion, and the chaotic misadventures of Freddie Palmer was finally closed. For now. Because in Youngstown, law was never boring, and Felicity was just getting started. Epilogue, foreshadowing a new case. Felicity Harmon leaned back in her chair, cane propped against the desk, and surveyed the small office that had survived another trial mostly intact. Papers were stacked in precarious towers, the faint smell of old coffee lingered, and somewhere under a pile of legal briefs, a cat she didn't remember bringing in was stretching and yawning. Jenny popped her head in, hair still wild from a morning of frantic filing. "You did it again," she said, shaking her head. "Another impossible case. Another victory. Honestly, Felicity, it's exhausting just watching you work." Felicity smiled, tapping her oversized glasses with a finger. "Exhausting? Jenny, my dear, they are the ones exhausted. I'm merely the breeze that ruffles the papers on their desks." Freddie Palmer shuffled into the office, looking a little more relaxed than the last time she'd seen him. Jack lingered behind, still slightly awkward and trying not to trip over a stack of legal pads. "Thanks," Freddie said, earnest. I don't know what I'd have done without you. You'd have spent a few months in county, learned how to knit sweaters in the holding cell, and maybe developed a taste for prison cuisine," Felicity said flatly. "But you're welcome anyway." Jack coughed. Thanks, too." Felicity waved a dismissive hand. Yes, but let's not get sentimental. I have work to do. Justice never naps, and neither do I, except when it's nap time, which is always negotiable." She bent down to stroke the mysterious office cat, who purred loudly. "Now, let's talk about tomorrow. You see, the city has a funny way of bringing new problems to my doorstep while everyone else is still recovering from the last one." A knock echoed at the office door. Felicity turned, cane in hand, ready for action. A courier handed her a small, unmarked envelope. No stamp, no return address, just a crisp piece of paper folded neatly inside. Felicity unfolded it. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, then sparkled. Inside was a single line. "We've heard about your skills. There's a matter that requires finesse, discretion, and a little chaos. Are you available?" Felicity grinned, tapping her cane on the floor. "Discretion and chaos? That's my specialty. Consider me available." She looked at Jenny. "Pack the office snacks, dear. And tell the cats to behave. We're about to get interesting again." Freddie and Jack exchanged a glance. "I have a feeling," Jack said slowly, "this is going to be something." Felicity adjusted her glasses, standing taller than her 5 feet could suggest, voice brimming with mischief. "Oh, my boy, something is exactly what we do best. Now, let's make some law, and maybe a little trouble while we're at it." Outside the office window, Youngstown streets gleamed under the setting sun. Somewhere, a new case was already waiting, a new challenge, a new chaos, a new adventure. And Felicity Harmon, Septuagenarian, irreverent, unstoppable, would be there to meet it head-on, cane tapping, glasses glinting, and humor at the ready. Because in this town, justice was never quiet, and a Felicity Harmon courtroom performance was never done. The city held its breath. And she grinned.
Thank you for listening to the Septuagenarian Lawyer. Your time in Felicity Harmon's chaotic courtroom is truly appreciated. If you enjoyed the ride, be sure to check out the Septuagenarian Lawyer music album on your favorite music platform and keep the mischief going. This has been a Violet N. Spring production.